It is a couple days past Halloween, early November. Color's still good, and I meant to do this before Halloween, but I have come to Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, supposedly one of the most haunted cemeteries in Cook County, if not in Illinois. So there's all kinds of creepy stories about this place, and I'd never been here, so I decided I'd come check it out. Not that I'm a huge believer in supernatural stuff like this, although I've had a couple weird things happen in my life. And my best buddy, he seems to be sensitive to whatever this is, and he's got several creepy stories, which at the end of this I'll tell. Anyway, you can't actually drive into the cemetery. You have to park across Midlothian Turnpike. Turnpike's not a term that's used very often up here in northern Illinois. Kind of a eastern and southern thing. Anyway, so you got to park across the street, and then you got to walk over here, and then you can walk up this road into the cemetery. Photographically today, I have my Lumix G9 Mark II with the plain Jane 12 to 60 Lumix lens, the 9mm Leica, just in case I need wider, and I also have the 100 to 300 Lumix lens, just in case I see a hawk or something that I want a shot of. So let's check this place out and see if it's really as creepy as its reputation says. There are some sort of appropriately spooky looking trees walking on the road into the place. Over on Midlothian Turnpike, they're doing construction, so you're going to hear that in the background. But nice walk through the woods, even if this is just a cemetery with nothing going on here. And actually, about to arrive at the cemetery. So what they say is that it used to be just left alone, and there was a lot of overgrowth, and which kind of gave it the air of being kind of a spooky place. A pretty impressive old oak tree here, pretty gnarled. But now they maintain it, so they mow it and they keep it clean, and evidently there are people who are taking care of the graves. And they were interring people here at least into the 1960s. So I found a gravestone online. Somebody was buried in the 1960s. So it's not like there hasn't been anybody buried here. It's still not real recent, but it's not like it's back in 1900 or something. Coming up on the gate to the cemetery. So this is Forest Preserve land, so it's open to the public. And of course nobody's being buried here anymore because it's Forest Preserve land. And you can see over there in the distance, if you see a flashing light, that is a construction out on the road. But just check this place out. Doesn't appear to be all that creepy, really, and I've been to a lot of cemeteries. In fact, I think the ones near us in Forest Park are somewhat creepier. This pond is just to the north, adjacent to Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, and you can see that's Midlothian Turnpike on the other side of the pond. That's where they're doing the construction. There's mythology about this pond, and supposedly back in the gangster days, Al Capone days of Chicago, they used it to dump bodies. There's never been any proof of that. I think they've actually looked and they've never found anybody at the bottom of this pond. So, fun story, but probably not true. Well, this is interesting. People have left plastic flowers at this boulder. This is not a tombstone. This is a piece of the Canadian Shield that was dropped here by the glacier, because that looks like granite or something similar, and that's not something you'd find here except for the glaciers. So they dropped this boulder. They're called glacial erratics, and we find them all over Illinois, about the northern two-thirds of Illinois, because the glacier stopped about two-thirds of the way down. So yeah, that's what that is. Not a tombstone. Yeah, maybe somebody's buried under it, but that would have happened thousands of years ago. Well, fun visit to Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, but time to head back home. Stay tuned. I'll have a follow-up from when I get home. But so far, I haven't seen anything unusual. But who knows? Maybe something will show up in this video. The trail to the cemetery actually goes past the gate to the west, and there's a creek here. It's autumn. There is some water, not a whole lot. It probably flows pretty well in the spring. But one of the ghost stories about Bachelor's Grove is of a ghost house. Like, people say they come here and they see a house, I guess, in the woods. And here's what's interesting. So the trail comes up to the creek. It actually goes up the creek to the south. But apparently there is an old foundation here. So I'm guessing there probably was some sort of structure here at some point in the past. You find these things in the Cook County Forest Reserves fairly frequently. You find concrete buried, sticking out of the ground. I mean, foundations and such. And some of the Forest Reserve land was developed before it was bought by the county. And near me in Forest Park, if you go north, there's an area along the Des Plaines River that actually in the old maps, it's a subdivision. It was abandoned because the river floods. So now it's part of the Forest Reserve. And yeah, you find these old foundations in there. Well, that was Bachelor's Grove, the most haunted cemetery in Illinois. But it kind of raises the question: wouldn't all cemeteries be haunted? I mean, especially right here. I mean, there's actually two right over here. One's an old one that's been abandoned. One's a pretty large one. And there's another one over there, and there's another one over there, and there are more dead people here in this town than there are living. And never heard really any stories about any of these. But yeah. But Bachelor's Grove has had an interesting history because, it's not a very big cemetery. It dates back to pioneer days. It was kind of left alone and actually got overgrown, and then kids started going there and vandalizing and knocking over tombstones, which maybe awoken some spirits. Wah. But there is actually a photograph, supposedly, of a ghost, and I'm going to put it up here. This was, and this is a low res, and this is a screen grab. This was taken by a woman named Judy Fells, who was a paranormal researcher and using infrared film, and supposedly took this picture. Didn't see anything at the time, but when she had the film developed, there was this weird sort of white lady-looking thing sitting on a tombstone. And if you looked at the slideshow, that tombstone's in there. It's got the pattern on the sides of it. Of course, that's really not proof, because you just don't know about certain things. And even back in the days of film, it was, people faked this kind of stuff all the time. I'm not saying this is. Also, I want to make sure this is qualifies as fair use, since I'm commenting on it, and I'm also crediting the photographer, which, by the way, if you're going to use something fair use, you actually have to credit who you're taking the image from. And you can't just put it up and say it's fair use. You have to say who it belongs to. So, but as I said at the beginning of this video, that I do have a friend who, actually I have several people who have told me stories, and I actually have one myself, one that was just a little bit weird, might probably have a logical explanation, probably does, but at the time it kind of freaked me out. I'll tell it in a bit. But my best friend growing up seems to be somewhat sensitive to this sort of thing. Although, again, that raises a question: is if you're open to it, do you tend to see these things more? And if you're not, you don't. But his brother had a house. His brother and his sister-in-law had a house for a time outside Philadelphia. And he even went to visit one time, and he had actually kind of a weird thing happen. They were supposed to they were getting up, they were supposed to go fishing, and he thought his brother was up because somebody was walking around in the hallway. So he got up, it's very early in the morning, and nothing. And he goes over to his brother's bedroom, door's closed, he knocks on it, and his brother goes, yeah? He goes, hey, I thought you were up, there's somebody out here. And his brother says, no, but that kind of thing happens here. The other weird thing about that house was they had a room that they kept off limits to the dogs, and they also, they had gates on it. And when they vacuumed it, it would leave, you vacuum a rug, a carpet, you'll get the pattern of the vacuuming in that carpet, depending on the carpet. But this carpet, that's what happened. And they would, they went out after vacuuming, went out, came back, and there were footprints in the carpet, according to them. Another story, my mother had a cousin, lived outside Nashville, Tennessee, a little town called Brentwood, suburb. I looked on Google Maps, much more built up than it was back in those days. They had 5 acres. They raised show horses. This is one of the weirdest stories. So one morning, my cousin's daughter was getting ready to go out and take care of some of the horses. And so she had some stuff in her arms, and she opened up the front door to go out. And everybody else was in the kitchen, including my mom's aunt, who was cousin's mother, right? And they heard her scream. She dropped everything. She screamed. She comes running into the kitchen and says, oh, my God, I opened the door, and there was a man standing outside the door, and he just disappeared. And my mom's aunt, Aunt Alice, said, who had been getting up. She'd get up in the morning. She was up before everybody else, and she would make breakfast. And she said, I am so glad you saw that man, because I've seen him several times a week. He walks past the window right here. And I didn't want to mention it because I thought you folks might think I was getting on and getting a little, dingy. So that was not the only story about that house, but I'm not going to go further with this. My story, and again, this probably is just one of those things that could happen, was back when I was in sales. I would go to Detroit, also Ann Arbor, Michigan, fairly frequently. I sold laboratory instrumentation. And I had this one job where I actually had to carry the equipment with me. And so, I mean, if I didn't have to carry equipment, I would fly. But quite frequently, I had to take, this instrument with me to demonstrate. And I had a Toyota Sienna minivan, was the company car. I had the stuff in the back. And I'd go over there to that area and do my business and then drive back to Chicago. Now, the thing about that is, you lose an hour going over there, but you gain an hour coming back. So what would happen is I'd be driving back in the afternoon, and I'd get to Western Michigan right around when rush hour was starting in the city. And I'd be driving past a couple of state parks, one of which was a place called Warren Woods. And so what I do is I would just go to Warren Woods, and I would take a hike through the woods. It's actually old growth forest. It's a pretty amazing place. And always had a camera. And so I was parking in the little parking area, comes in from the south, and there's some picnic tables there. And I had to put my hiking boots on. So I had those in the back. So I get out of the car, and I open up the sliding door, grab hiking boots, and then I look over to the picnic tables, and I hadn't seen this when I pulled up. There's a guy, and he's sitting on the picnic table, and it was one of these days, it was in the summertime, sun was pretty low, bit of a haze, and this guy's sitting on this picnic table bench smoking a cigarette, just sitting there. He doesn't even look at me. He's just sitting there smoking a cigarette. And I'm like, and there's no cars there. I'm the only one there. There are no cars parked there. And so I'm like, And then, I'm getting my boots on. I get up to go to the back of the car. I look again, and he's sitting there. And again, he's not looking at me. He's just sitting there smoking a cigarette. And it was kind of hazy. And so I go and I open up the sliding door, and I reach in to grab something else to take with me on my hike, and I slam the door, I go back, I turn back, and I look, and he's gone. Like, he's gone. This is within a few seconds, he's not there. And I'm like, well, that's weird. And at the time, I wasn't thinking anything paranormal. I was thinking, okay, where did this guy go? Because I want to know where he's gone. And I go and I look down the trail, because I'm right next to the trail, look down the trail, nothing. And then I'm listening. And I'm saying, well, if he went into the woods, I'd hear him. Nothing. And I was really debating, like, should I take this walk? And finally I decided, well, I don't hear anything. I don't know where he is, but, I'll go ahead and take this walk. And, I've got a knife with me. Not that would help if he was armed otherwise. But yeah, never saw him. Did my hike, about a 45-minute hike, came back to the car, never saw him. Ran into two women on my way out, and I said, okay, I got to ask you, does this place have anything weird that happens? And they go, yeah, sometimes there's kind of weird stuff. And they said, what happened? And I told them, they're like, that's, they didn't confirm or deny. But so that was the one thing that I've had happen. I just, it's a head scratcher, because I didn't see that guy again. And I couldn't even really see his features, of his face. I mean, he was probably 25, 30 yards away from me. And that's, about the same number of meters roughly. Just a weird thing. So does it have a logical explanation? Yeah, the guy snuck off. For some reason, didn't want me to see him. But just weird. Anyway, hey, I know Halloween's over, but hey, if you've got any weird stories, feel free to leave them down below. Again, people who are familiar with me know that I'm a trained scientist and I'm a pretty rational guy. So I always go, well, maybe there's a rational explanation for any of this stuff. But like I say, I know people who swear up and down that they've had these weird sorts of experiences. That's it for now. If this was interesting to you, hit that like button. I'm Todd Banner. I will see you next time.